in Mali, and Ms. Beatrice Abuya, Acting Regional Director, Search for Common Ground. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its deliberation of item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw attention of council members to document S/2023/611, a letter dated 18 August 2023 from the Secretary General addressed to the President of the Security Council. I now give the floor to Mr. El Kassim Wan.
I thank you, Madam President, for the opportunity I have been afforded today to take stock of the progress made regarding the withdrawal process of MINUSMA and its closure, following the decision taken on the 30th of June 2023 to put an end to its mandate in accordance with the request issued to that effect by the Malian authorities. This briefing is to supplement the letter sent by the Secretary-General dated 18th of August, immediately following the adoption of Resolution 2690, which called for the closure of the mission to be complete by the 31st of December 2023. MINUSMA, in coordination with the United Nations Secretariat, established a comprehensive working group in order to establish a plan for the mission's drawdown and withdrawal. This plan provided for the withdrawal and repatriation of personnel and of equipments and material deployed in MINUSMA's area of operation. This would occur according to a precise time frame and in a precise sequence, while we all bore in mind the need to ensure an orderly process and a very safe one.
Of cooperation with the Malian authorities for the efficient conduct of this undertaking. On 3rd July, I met with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mali to discuss requirements for a safe and orderly process. Subsequently, coordination mechanisms comprising both the transitional government and municipal representatives were put in place at technical and political levels to coordinate all aspects of the withdrawal and ensure that the 31st December deadline is respected. I commend the Malian authorities for the cooperation and support they have extended so far. Madam President, closing a mission built over a decade within a period of 6 months is a very complex and ambitious endeavor. In concrete terms, it entails the repatriation of 12,947 uniformed personnel, the separation of 1,786 civilian staff, the repatriation or relocation of a load of approximately 5,500 sea containers of contention and United Nations-owned equipment, and almost 4,000 vehicles, as well as the closure and handover of 12 camps and 1 temporary operating base to Malian civilian authorities. The task is made even more challenging by a host of other constraints linked to geography, climate, logistics, and infrastructure. To this end, one should add the serious risk associated with the prevailing security issues. As outlined in the Secretary General letter, the drawdown and closure of the mission is unfolding in 2 phases through 31st December 2023, followed by a liquidation period which will begin on January 1st, 2024. The first phase of the drawdown and withdrawal began on 17 July, focusing on the closure of the smallest and furthest outposts from our supercamps in Timbuktu, Gao, and Mopti, and shrinking our geographical footprint by 25%. On 25 August, 2 days ago, we completed this first phase with the closure of the Menaka base. Earlier this month, we successively closed the temporary operating base in Ogosagu, in the Bandiagara region of central Mali, as well as the camps in Ber and Tundam in the Tombouctou region. The departure of MINUSMA from each of these camps was accompanied by the signing with the designated civilian representatives of the Malian authorities of documents that attest to the state of the vacated camps and the fulfillment of the mission's environmental obligations. In this respect, I would like to emphasize that the mission is making all reasonable efforts to complete environmental remediation and removal of hazardous materials prior to returning premises to the authorities, in spite of the serious time constraints and the progressive reduction of the security umbrella under which we are operating. Additionally, negotiations are underway to finalize an overarching framework agreement that will spell out the obligations of the 2 parties in line with relevant United Nations instruments and policies.
Significant progress has been made thus far. We remain on the right track towards the mission's closure, and that should be completed indeed by the 31st of December. However, difficulties have emerged in the implementation of this first phase of the withdrawal plan. In this regard, the experience of the closure of the Bear camp was revealing. The last convoy of blue helmets, equipment and materials, which withdrew from Bear to go towards the city of Timbuktu, took 51 hours to cover a distance of 57 kilometers due to the nature of the ground, the terrain rather, which in no way works in our favor. And that was worsened by the rainy season and insecurity. The convoy was attacked twice by unidentified extremist elements. 4 blue helmets were injured and 3 vehicles were damaged before the convoy's arrival in Timbuktu. The withdrawal from Bear also proved difficult on a political level. Malian authorities and the signatory movements of the Agreement for Peace and Reconciliation in Mali disagreed regarding the fate of the camp after MINUSMA's departure. its part, given the fact that clashes around the Bear area extended and spread, and given the risk that the situation posed for the security of the Blue Helmets, the mission had to bring forward its departure from the camp. It took place 2 days earlier than planned. Moreover, convoys transporting material and equipment from our bases in Gundam and Usaga were in the center of Mali were targeted by IEDs. At the same time, the last convoy going from Gao to Menaka was also targeted by extremists, by unidentified armed elements. Fortunately, this attack did not cause material damage and did not claim any lives. With the end of Phase 1, we repatriated and have repatriated now a total of 1,096 uniformed personnel, and 79 containers of equipment and material have already been transferred outside of Mali. A new drawdown of uniformed personnel is expected to take place during September. As regards civilian personnel, and in accordance with the United Nations personnel regulations and their status, 291 members of civilian personnel, including UN volunteers, in other words, 33% of our civilian staff, will be separated from the mission by 30th of September. Madam President, the second phase of the drawdown and withdrawal process that we are now embarking upon will continue until the 15th of December 2023. That second phase will focus on the closure of 6 bases, Tessalit, Aguelhok, and Kidal in the north of Mali, Douentza and Mopti in the center of the country, and Onsongo in the northeast. The personnel, equipment, and material concerned will be redeployed to super camps in Timbuktu, Gao, and Bamako before being repatriated to their respective countries. This phase will be incredibly difficult indeed. Convoys set to evacuate personnel, equipment, and material from Tessalit, Aguelhok, and Kidal to Gao, for example, will have to cover 563 kilometers to get to Tessalit, 415 to get to Aguelhok, and 352 kilometers to get to Kidal. At least 1,050 lorries will be required to transport all equipment, contingent-owned equipment and material, as well as that belonging to the United Nations. We must also consider the fact that the terrain is difficult and insecurity is an ever-present threat. The withdrawal of material and equipment from Timbuktu, in addition to the security problems it will encounter, is faced with logistical constraints. We will have to transport more than 6 containers a day by using barges on the Niger River during the months of the navigable season running from August to November every year. With such limitations, the withdrawal of 2,000 loads of freight scheduled to take place from Timbuktu will require the identification of additional routes. The situation in Niger is having an impact on our withdrawal plan, which is based on the use of transit zones in Cotonou and Lomé. It is vital that we are able to transport equipment and material through Niger and to its ports for subsequent repatriation to TCCs and PCCs concerned. In addition to logistical constraints, security limitations, the closure of MINUSMA also has a political dimension. That was to be predicted, given that MINUSMA's presence in the outposts in the north contributed to compliance on the part of the signatory parties with the ceasefire and security arrangements. MINUSMA's outposts also supported the implementation of the Peace and Reconciliation Agreement. This withdrawal is occurring in a context marked by the paralysis of bodies responsible for monitoring the peace agreement. These bodies have not met since November 2022. And there's also a grave deficit of trust between the parties. Unsurprisingly, parties have adopted diverging positions regarding the fate of camps to be left by the mission. Here, the transitional authorities have signalled to the mission that they themselves intend to retake MINUSMA camps following the mission's withdrawal. They underscore the fact that the peace agreement does not revoke the state's responsibility to assume responsibility for the control of its territory in order to protect people and guarantee security. However, signatory movements, namely the CMA, have invoked the security arrangements of 2014 to object to the deployment of Malian armed forces into the areas that they control, and they've insisted on the need to work within the framework of the peace agreement. In the context of Resolution 2690, MINUSMA has recalled and continues to recall to all stakeholders the fact that the mission's withdrawal is taking place according to a tight timeframe. The mission has also continued to recall the parameters which underpin the closing of its camps, including the fact that the bases are legally transferred to the Malian state. Moreover, the mission continues to encourage parties to reach an agreement to avoid unnecessary incidents whose consequences could be considerable. Such incidents would complicate the withdrawal process, would negatively impact the work of UN bodies following the mission's closure, and would seriously imperil prospects for the resumption of the implementation of the peace agreement. That agreement is the cornerstone of Mali's long-term stabilization. It goes without saying that the situation is urgent in nature, given the very tight timeframe established for the mission's closure and the scant flexibility that we have when it comes to our withdrawal process. It is encouraging to note that stakeholders are aware of the delicate nature of the process and the need to manage it cautiously. Malian authorities, during several meetings with myself and USG Lacroix during his visit to Mali 2 weeks ago, underscored that they had no intention to clash with the signatory movements. They expressed their commitment to dialogue to resolve any problems which may arise, and they fully intended to support all efforts in that regard. Moreover, the signatory movements expressed their desire to resolve disputes peacefully and to contribute to the creation of conditions necessary for the resumption of the peace process. It is now incumbent upon all of the parties to transform these expressions of goodwill into tangible measures in order to avoid a crisis as unwelcome and potentially dangerous as that we've seen. It's up to them to forge ahead with the cause of peace and reconciliation in Mali, and they should draw on the progress made over the last 8 years to put an end to armed confrontation. Last week, the eminent leaders of Arab and Tuareg communities in Bamako facilitated dialogue and understanding with the signatory movements and the transitional authorities in order to avoid escalation and preserve the peace agreement. Madam President, these developments linked to the mission's withdrawal emphasise the importance of work conducted closely with the Malian authorities in terms of the transfer of tasks that were previously carried out by the mission. Between the 2nd and 4th of August, MINUSMA, together with the Malian government, led a 2-day discussion on support activities for the transition, for the peace process, for the restoration of the state's authority, for the promotion and protection of human rights, and on other cross-cutting issues. The UN country team, the United Nations Office for West Africa and the Sahel, the African Union, ECOWAS, and the UCAP mission attended that meeting. The goal was to better explain the work accomplished and to evaluate the prospects and practical possibilities for tasks that have hitherto been done by MINUSMA, first and foremost by the Malian authorities, and then, if needs be, by the UNCT and other stakeholders. Government representatives reaffirmed that they would shoulder their responsibilities. Members of the UN country team also expressed their desire to support the transitional authorities on the basis of the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework for Mali, and indicated that they wish to take up some of MINUSMA's residual programs, while at the same time they underscored the need for additional resources. Discussions are underway about how to consolidate and preserve results obtained within the framework of support that we have with the Malian government. At the same time, there is a need to maintain an environment which will enable the United Nations long-term engagement in Mali and across the region. However, difficulties will remain given the tight time frame for the mission's withdrawal, as well as given the immediate cessation of its substantive mandate in accordance with Resolution 2690. That resolution did not provide for a transitional period as such. In that context, it's important to recognise that some tasks will not be able to be transferred effectively. MINUSMA is entering its last chapter. However, I must express my gratitude to TCCs and PCCs for their remarkable commitment. I pay tribute to all of our blue helmets, some of which have paid the ultimate sacrifice for the cause of peace and stability in Mali. MINUSMA has had a tangible impact on the ground and provided incalculable support to the Malian authorities and people. It proved to be, in so doing, one of the most difficult peace operations ever undertaken by the United Nations. MINUSMA is leaving Mali, but the United Nations, through its agencies, funds and programs, will remain in the country. Their work has never been as vital as it is today. I'm delighted by the guarantees given by the Malian authorities regarding their commitment to guaranteeing the security of United Nations personnel. I call upon member states to envisage making additional voluntary contributions to the UN country team and to the humanitarian personnel to allow them to contribute to afford assistance to people in need and to support Mali's development efforts. I thank you
for his briefing, and I now give the floor to Ms. Beatrice Abuya. Ms. Abuya, can you hear us? You have the floor.
Yes, I can hear you. Distinguished members of the Security Council, Madam President, I give you my most sincere greetings and thank you for this opportunity to speak to you today on the topic of MINUSMA and the current situation in Mali. I am speaking to you as someone involved in peace building and the acting regional director for Search for Common Ground, an NGO that was established some 40 years ago with the aim of supporting peace building efforts and social cohesion. We make long-term commitments to build healthy, safe, and just societies in areas where local populations face violent conflict. My commitment to this work stems from my personal experience as I've repeatedly suffered the consequences of political conflict in my country of origin. The thoughts I share today come from the experience of my Malian colleagues, but the opinions I voice are my own. I would like to take a moment to recognize and salute the efforts of all military, civilians, Malians, and international citizens who have made sacrifices for the peace and prosperity of Mali. I honor all of these sacrifices in the fight for peace, in the defense of dignity, and to ensure every Malian's right to build their future. Today, MINUSMA's withdrawal creates an opportunity to reshape approaches and responses. It is a time for the United Nations and the countries that you represent to redouble efforts in this area. This will require careful planning and coordination in order to protect human lives, dignity, and create the conditions for a lasting peace. To do this, we propose 4 elements that we believe are essential. First, any action must make sure that the withdrawal of the mission does not endanger and jeopardize the efforts to ensure peace and security that have been made by the Malian government and MINUSMA. Secondly, the UN and the international community must show creativity and flexibility in order to adapt financing mechanisms and make sure that basic services and development resources continue to be available. This means that MINUSMA financing for civilian and stabilization projects must be maintained in the country through mechanisms such as the Peace Building Fund, so that interventions can continue in support of local communities together with civil society representatives, both national and international. Thirdly, we must look at how UN and the international community can reinvest these funds in order to continue support for building strong institutions that can ensure the rule of law. And finally, we recommend that civilian mediation and conflict resolution efforts be strengthened in order to establish frank dialogue, especially within local communities. As we enter a new era in international cooperation on security in Mali, I ask for your ongoing support for the Malian people. The decisions taken within this international body in the coming days will have a direct impact on the population of Mali and their lives. We must keep in mind the reason that we are meeting here today is to help the Malian people to lead safe, prosperous lives. We must keep their requests and wishes at the heart of our discussions. Once again, I thank the Security Council and you, Madam President, for listening to me today, and I hope that the initiatives and decisions taken today will lead to a lasting peace for Mali and the region. I thank you.
I thank Ms. Abuya for her briefing. I would like to draw the attention of speakers to paragraph 22 of Note 507, which encourages all participants in council meetings to deliver their statements in 5 minutes or less, in line with the Security Council's commitment to make more effective use of open meetings. I now give the floor to council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of France.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank Special Representative and Ms. Abuya for their briefings. Friends, take notes of the letter of the Secretary General on the withdrawal of MINUSMA. We pay tribute to the work carried out by the men and women of peace in Mali, and we honor the memory of the peacekeepers who have lost their lives there. The Malian transitional authorities have committed to guaranteeing the safe withdrawal of the mission without restrictions on its movements or its supplies, in full respect of Resolution 2690. It is fundamental that they respect this commitment on the ground. I recall that the agreement on the status of forces remains in effect until the departure of the last MINUSMA elements from Mali. Next, I would like to express our concern regarding the peace agreement. The clashes that occurred in Bayer with the participation of Wagner mercenaries are a serious violation of the ceasefire. France calls on the parties to avoid any escalation and resume discussions under the auspices of the international mediation. The UN must remain fully committed in support of the Algiers Agreement, and France is in favor of the UN benefiting from all the necessary resources in order to do this. Madam President, the Security Council must continue to monitor the situation in Mali with extreme vigilance. We must lend our full support to the efforts of ECOWAS so that the political transition can be completed within the agreed time frame and can permit for the advent of a democratically elected civil authorities. We understand the concern of countries in the region regarding the withdrawal of MINUSMA, as the heads of state of ECOWAS have called for a thorough reflection on its consequences. And last but not least, we must remain attentive to the impact of this withdrawal on the daily life of the Malian population.